Hey everyone, it's Dan. This is going to be part two of my battle report series for the Duel of Titans event that I went to now a week ago. I'll put a link in the description for the first half, so games 1 through 3. So this video is going to detail games 4 and 5, so day 2 of the same event. I was looking forward to this game quite a bit because we knew our pairings by the evening of the first night, and we were all going out to dinner kind of talking about them. And so this is actually Brian. He's in my gaming group. He runs, he's running VC in this event, but he has actually two halfling themed armies. So the first one is not undead, and he uses that for a few different armies. So Empire, he does Sylvan Elves, and he does Goblins. But this one is undead halfling army, and it is beautiful, just excellently painted. They're all, I believe, max mini models, I think is what he said. So they're all metal. And it's just a lovely army, very nice even just to deploy against it. So it was a real treat taking pictures for this particular battle report. I thought everything turned out looking really great. Um, his list I was going to pull up, but I noticed there was kind of a cropping issue with the first video I posted. I don't know if it was like a landscape portrait thing on my phone when I was doing the screen capture. But what I'll do instead is just kind of tell you what it is. As he's deployed there across from me, he's got two big blocks of ghouls, each that have a ghoul courtier, like a vampire courtier with the ghoul upgrades. They've got 4 wounds, 4 up fortitude save in those 2 ghoul blocks. He's got a barrow guard with a vampire count that's decked out. I think he's got 2 up armor and the eternity gem defensively. But then he's got True Thirst and a couple other things. There's a necromancer and a zombie bunker behind the barrow guard there. 2 units of fellbats behind either unit of ghouls. He's got a big unit of spectral hunters on the left, and then a unit of 6 phantom hosts on his far right, my left. So that's how he deployed. If you hadn't inferred, this is refused flank deployment, and the secondary in this case is King of the Hill, which you all might already be aware of, but I only learned recently that you can both choose the same terrain piece for the purpose of the objective. And indeed, in this particular setup, this map, there were only 2 eligible pieces. It was the wall in the very center of the picture, and then the woods kind of off to the right. And we both thought it would be fun, narratively, to choose the same terrain feature. So we both chose those woods, and that's what we're fighting over here. My list, of course, is the same. The way I deployed is very similar to what I did in the first game against VC, so the game against Jeff Durham's list. Hoping to have more success this time, but I have the 3 units of flagellants in the front of my line there. I'm essentially just going to throw them at his 3 big scoring blocks, knowing that I'm going to lose the flagellants, but I can do, I think, enough damage to those units that I can then move in with the support unit, the parent units, to finish him off. So that's the thought process, especially since we're just going to be dumping all of our squaring units into those woods there. So if I can whittle his down to a manageable size, it should make things a little bit easier for me. And then, yeah, so all my scoring units are kind of behind the flagellants off to the left, the electoral cav on the far left. The riders have already vanguarded up toward the phantom hosts, and then the rangers actually couldn't deploy anywhere except on the left side of the board, just because of the way things sat. I couldn't fit them anywhere 18 inches away, or even within those woods 12 inches away. So they're off on the left. There's really not much for them to do this game anyway, because they're going to chip some wounds off of the zombies. Yeah, so they're just going to be trying not to die over on the left. In terms of first turn, he dropped for first, and I then counter deployed, as you see everything as I've just described. So let's jump right into turn 1 here. So he rushes up with everything. He's kind of keeping the Vargulf over on the right-hand side. I don't think I mentioned that as part of his deployment. There's a Vargulf there over on the right to try to start threatening flanks. I realized, too, with all the ethereal units on the left, I'm going to have kind of a hell of a time over there because the only way I can deal with them is either through my 2 missile spells that I still have or combat resolution. So we'll see what happens over there. His first magic phase is an 8 to 6. And he pops up a unit of zombies. This is actually very similar to what Jeff Durham also did in his opening round, where I realized this is a great move to just pop up a unit of zombies in front of a unit kind of across from somebody's battle line, because I even started having irrational thoughts about like, well, I should charge these zombies and then kill them, and then I'll overrun into his barrow guard. Um, so it creates an interesting situation where your opponent is more likely to make mistakes, because you create this kind of tempting target out in the middle of the field, and of course that overruns like 11 inches. So what am I even thinking? And if the zombies do any damage, that's basically the price of a fireball, right? So it's a good opening move there. And that's it. So no shooting, so into my turn. So I also rush up with everything. I've learned from my mistake in the first game where I lost objective against Chris's list, that I want to take the initiative and basically be the one that he has to shift out of the objective. So that's what I'm trying to do here, is running all of my scoring units kind of at an angle toward those woods. The flagellants do charge in that little zombie unit that popped up. Magic is a small phase, 5 to 4. Those dice actually I picked up, I think, between the first and the second game, and they're Games Workshop dice, and it's like one of the most reasonably priced products Games Workshop has that I've seen put out in a while. It was like $12 for a brick of 36 dice, and the skulls I thought looked cool for my mercenary theme. So anyway, I get an unerring strike off on the Phantom Hosts, but only do, I think, a couple of wounds. And then we do kill the zombies, but I don't fall for the bait. Don't take the bait, fall for the trap, and don't overrun, so they just stand there. And then in his turn 2 is what we're into now. No charges from him either. He moves the Fellbats up to chaff the unit of Flagellants, so he only has to tackle maybe 2 of them at a time instead of all 3. And then his Vargwolf moves over to the far right, anticipating that my unit of Flagellants is going to charge that ghoul block, and then he'll be then able to countercharge my flank in his subsequent turn. His magic is a 7 to 5, and he gets off Perception of Strength on the Barrow Guard, so there's Strength 5. Again, my thought is the Flagellants are going to die no matter what. It's really just a question of how much damage can they do. So I'm more focused on trying to stop raises from happening. More zombies popping up to chaff me where I don't want them to be. So anyway, that's why I'm not as worried about this. And already I'm starting to think that vampire count, let me zoom in a little bit here. He's got a very nice vampire count model there. It's the little halfling Dracula model in the center of that unit. And I'm starting to do the math in my head on those flagellants dumping all their attacks, or I guess 9 maximum attacks is what I could allocate on that vampire count, because he's only got a 2-up armor, which drops to a 4-up armor against great weapon attacks, and then he's just got the Eternity Gem, so he's going to ignore the first wound most likely. So I think with that number of attacks, with battle focus, granted hitting on 5s, wounding on 4s, I think I kill him in like 2 rounds of combat, or at least that's what I'm hoping. So I'm starting to do those calculations in my mind. And then we're already into my turn 2. So I do a few charges. So over on the right, I do charge with those flagellants into his ghoul block. The flagellants in the center do charge into his barrow guard. And then the other unit of flagellants on the left charge the bat chaff. And then on the far left there, I was more concerned with locking down these phantom hosts, because I was worried about them charging into the spears, and then the spears just getting stuck there for basically the entire game. So I charged the electro cav in, charged the riders on the flank. Again, I don't think I'm going to be able to deal with them quickly, but the riders on the flank gives me a little extra combat res, and then if I hit him enough times, he should start rolling up 1s and 2s for Aegis eventually. So we'll see what happens. That's what I'm trying to do. Magic is a 7 to 5 phase, and I get off Stars Line. Again, now I'm laser focused on allocating as many attacks on this vampire as I can. So I was throwing, I think, consistently throughout this event, just because it couples so devastatingly well with flagellants. I would throw like 4 and 5 dice at Stars Align just to try to push it through, and I get it in this case. And then no shooting. The Rangers are basically just blinking shots at the Spectral Hunters on the hill, not doing anything. But check this out, guys. I got very lucky. I basically hit and wounded with all of my attacks that I allocated on the vampire. And then, as I said, even without Stars line up, I think they killed this vampire like barely. Like maybe it's like 3 wounds that they do exactly on average. But with Stars line up, I think I rolled like 8 wounds on him, and then just to add insult to injury, he I think failed like all of his armor saves, like rolled all 1s, 2s, and 3s, and also failed the Eternity Gem roll. Rolled a 1 for that, because why not? So terrible stroke of luck for my opponent at this phase in the game, because this is only turn 2, but very lucky for me. that they were able to assassinate the vampire. So do some damage to the ghouls on the right as well. You can see they've hurt me back, but we're just going to be wailing on each other. And then do kill those bats. And do some damage on the left to the Phantom Hosts as well. You can see they've done at least 1 wound each to the Riders and the Electro Cav as well. So we're just going to be pushing on each other for at least the next couple of turns. So what this shot is, this is now his turn 3. So his movement phase, he's charged the Vargulf into the flank of the Flagellants on the right, and does not charge. I thought he might charge those ghouls into the Flagellants that had just killed the Fell Bats, but he doesn't, which I think was the right move, especially with the Vampire count dying. So he's going to try to pick up points elsewhere. But magic to him is a 9-6. And he gets a raise off. So not many people maybe know this, but my very first army way back in 6th edition Warhammer was vampire counts. And so as a vampire count player back then, I had this mentality that as long as I'm getting my raises off, like the worst thing my opponent can do as a VC player is stop my raises, because then I'm just not going to win the game. So that kind of thought as a player has carried over to my gaming career as a VC opponent. The sort of at any cost, I'm going to try to stop your raises. Like, even if you're blowing up my units left and right, I'm saving my dice for your raises. But even with that, I was not able to stop this raise. He did a bubble raise from the Necromancer that raised a bunch of ghouls back, raised some Barrow Guard back, and raised some zombies up. So I tried, but failed. And then over here, they kill all but one of the Flagellants, which when I first saw this, I thought this was like a stroke of game-winning luck for me. But of course, this is my opponent's turn, so this doesn't actually change things. Because in my turn, we're just going to fight again, and then he's going to kill them and then charge again in his subsequent turn. So this doesn't really affect much of anything. And then, yeah, this is, I think, just a shot of where things sit there. Oh, the Flagellants in the center had been finished off by the Barrow Guard, and then he ultimately reforms, which I think you'll see in a subsequent picture there. Over here, yeah, we're just doing a couple of wounds to each other every turn, so there they'll sit, maybe till the end of time, and then we're into my turn 3. So I do a couple of charges here, so I charge in the Flagellants and the support unit of heavy infantry into the ghoul brick here. This is a trick you might have seen in the last couple of games I've done, where that support unit, not many people realize this. It kind of catches some opponents off guard because not a lot of Empire players play support combat units. But that unit, when it's within 8 inches of, for example, those spearmen, get to use the spearman's rank bonus for steadfast. So that unit within range of the general and the BSB, which it currently is essentially a rerollable discipline 10 right now, unless you kill 16 of them. So if things go horribly badly with the Flagellants, that's still a way for me to lock down the ghouls until I want to deal with them. And I also was able to get a corner charge on the Phantom Hosts with the spears, try to bring in some extra static combat resolution there. And yeah, that's pretty much all the charges for that phase. Magic is an 8-6 to me. And I also ramrod through Stars Align here on this unit of Flagellants. You can see he's got a ghoul character there. It's like the undead witch hunter guy in the middle. And so since the last assassination run was so successful, I'm going to see if I can do it again. I think this was from shooting, actually. The Rangers have been pumping, granted, 30 shots a turn, hitting on 5s, I guess, wounding on 4s. So he's eventually going to roll 1s and 2s. But I think all of these happened in a single shooting phase, which was just surprising. And then combat here, he continues to do like a wound or 2 to the Riders, does 1 wound to the Spears. I win combat, and he just takes another wound or 2. So there they sit. This combat, I haven't removed my casualties yet. The 8 marked on dice behind the Flagellants is what I'm ultimately going to take off. But they once again assassinate a vampire and then do a bunch of wounds to the ghouls. So that's looking really good in the center now. And then over on the right, predictably, they kill the last Flagellant and then pivot like that. And now we're into his turn 4. So he's lost a couple of characters now. So he's taken some bolder moves. So charging flank on the Barrow Guard. He charges the Spectral Hunters into the support unit. That's off to the left of the ghouls there. And that's, oh no, down here. That's what I was missing. The other unit of ghouls and the Vargulf both charge into that support unit, which I had basically like a ½ inch in front of the spears. Because again, same trick that I'm now obsessed with. which is that unless he kills 16 of them, that unit's going to be essentially unbreakable, rerollable discipline 10, and then I'll be able to flank charge with those spears. Magic is an 8 to 5 to him, and then he gets off, I think, another raise, despite all of my talking about stopping raises. I think he gets a raise off there, and then he also gets off Whispers of the Veil on the Flagellants, which really hurts. Jeff Durham, my game against him, I think he got this off something like 3 times in our game, and every single time it wasted a unit of Flagellants, because them on Res 3 is really tight. Yeah, and that's exactly what happens. We're into the combat phase, and you can see between the Barrow Guard and the ghouls, he killed off all the Flagellants, but he did a number on those ghouls. But the support unit holds, because they are steadfast, discipline 10, so I guess discipline 9 because of the Spectral Hunters. And then over on the left, finally killed the Phantom Hosts. I had reformed the Electro Cav to face away, because at this point I figured they're more a liability than anything, so I was just going to kind of run them in the other direction. But the Spears turn to face the flank of the Spectral Hunters. Again, this is my opponent's turn that this is happening. And then, yeah, you can see he did 9 wounds to the support unit there, but they hold. And then this picture in particular I love. This is like again, the nostalgia of 6th edition. This is like a 6th edition White Dwarf battle report picture to me, because it's just this big old scrum in the center of the board, where almost every single unit on the table is in combat, like almost like a picture that isn't actually demonstrating a real battle. It would be, the heavy metal team arranging things for just a picture, but it's not representing a real game. But in this case, it is a real game, where everything's flanking each other, everything's in combat. Anyway, the Spears charged flank up here. The Imperial Guard charged the Barrow Guard in the center. The Spears, as I'd mentioned, charged flank, and the other unit of Halberds charged into the front there. So just tons of combat. Big magic phase for me too. This is a 9 to 7, and I'm able to, I think in this case, bubble Stars Align from the wizard in the front left there, which affected the halberds, the spears, and the Imperial Guard. And then, for combat, I kill all but one of the Spectral Hunters on the left, and then the ghouls are down to 3 models in that combat there. And then over here, the smaller support unit that only had 9 guys left or 11, they had lost 9. They die, but I end up, I think, winning combat by a couple, just because of the sheer amount of combat res I brought in and the wounds I did to the ghouls. That's where things sit over there. And then, this one was, you can figure even with 5 files in, the Imperial Guard, strength 6, hitting on 4s, but re-rolling to hit, and then he doesn't get an armor save, so they beat him up real good, but there's still a couple of guys left in that unit. And now we're into his turn again. So he charges flank with the zombies, because he's got to do something about getting these scoring units out of those woods. So he charges the zombies into the flank of the spears, because everything's just flanking everything in this game. And then, unfortunately for him, that Vargulf, where he was positioned at the end of that combat, you can see he wants to be able to charge the flank on those halberds, but it was just out of his line of sight. And fortunate, too, that I had positioned things such that I didn't move the halberds over 1 file, only because the swordsmen were there. It wasn't because I was being clever. But that had they been, I think, 1 file over to the right, then the Vargulf would have been able to flank charge him. So he moves the Vargulf around to then charge in his next turn. Magic for him is at 8 to 5. And then he gets off Glory of Gold on the ghouls, so they'll have flaming attacks, and he throws the attribute onto the spears, so he'll get rerolls to wound against them. And because he's engaged on the flank and the front, that's why he didn't reform the ghouls, because he's not able to. And then this is combat phase, no shooting. So what happened here, it was kind of weird, but remember, the zombies are engaged with the spears in the flank. They win combat, so I do some wounds to the ghouls, like a rank of damage, do some wounds to the zombies, he does a couple of wounds to the halberds there. The spears fail their break test and run, the halberds pass, so the zombies pursue the spears because they weren't engaged with anything else, catch the spears, but overrun into the same combat that they had been in, but now engaged with the halberds. So, a bit of mental gymnastics for me, but that is where things now sit, is the halberds are engaged with both units to the front. And so at the end of that combat phase, because what I'm showing here is the combat with the Imperial Guard and the Barrow Guard, is they finish off the Barrow Guard and then pivot. Again, this is his turn. So then, of course, and then the Spectral Hunter dies and the 3 remaining ghouls die as well. So now we're into my next turn. So again, back to the joke about everything's flanking everything in this game. The trend continues. The Imperial Guard charge flank on the zombies. The spears up in the top there charge the remaining Fellbats, and then the other 2 units are now running toward the woods just in case anything catastrophic happens. But that's not what happens. I don't even think anything happens in the magic phase. But in combat, we pop both the ghouls and the zombies due to the attacks being brought in by those Imperial Guard. So the only thing he's going to have left at this point is going to be the Vargulf, because those bats are about to pop as well. Yeah, so into his last turn now, so he charges the Vargulf into the halberds, which flee, but he catches them because they don't flee very far. So this, I believe, is the last picture of that game. Yes, it is. So another tremendously bloody game where we're losing units left and right. I just was overjoyed by the sheer amount of combat and like unusual combats where stuff was getting all kinds of crazy flanks and what have you. But another strong outcome for the Empire, thanks in no small part to the again tremendous amount of luck I had turn 2, killing his vampire count, because at that point then he was just trying to hold on. And Brian put up a hell of a fight. At no point did he complain one time. He was just looking for opportunities to try to do damage to me, which I really enjoyed. So 18-2 is the outcome to me. It was 15-5 on points. I got objective, so an 18-2 for my round 4 results, which is obviously pretty great. So I'll take that, and then we're going to go right into game 5 here. So this was against Mark, who's also in my gaming group, and he was my round 1 opponent, I think, in the last Battle Report series that I posted maybe a year ago, 6 months ago, something like that. But he's playing his dwarves again. Normally plays KOE, but I think he's been playing dwarves for the better part of a year now, and plays a, I think, very strong mixed arms dwarf list. And again, I won't pull his list up just because I'm having like cropping issues. But to walk you through what he's got, he's got a king on a throne that is reroll successful wounds. He's got the D3 wound, strength 6. And he's got a Thane BSB on foot that has runes of lightning, and a runic smith that has harnessing and denial. In terms of his core lineup, he's got a small unit of crossbows, bigger unit of handgunners. He's got a unit of 30 graybeards with great weapons. And then in terms of support, he's got 10 seekers in skirmish formation, a big block of 30 Kingsguard, 2 cannons, 1 flaming, 1 not. I was actually scared at first. I thought it was a flame cannon, but it was a cannon with flaming, which is going to be less successful against my list than a flame cannon. And he's got an anvil and a copter. So it's a deceptive list because he plays it very well and very aggressively. When you first look at it, you're thinking, oh, he's going to sit back and shoot me. But as you might have already inferred from the picture here, he plays it very aggressively. So in terms of where he deployed, and sorry, just to be clear, this is Frontline Clash and Breakthrough is our secondary for this final game. He deploys the crossbows over on the far left-hand side there. He had the Seekers in front of the cannon, the Seekers Vanguard up. The Kingsguard, which is in the middle of the table there, 30 Kingsguard, have both the Warthrone General and the Runic Smith in there. And they had Runic Standard of Swiftness, so they Vanguard up as well. Unit of handguns in the very center of his line there, in front of the anvil, and next to another cannon that has just the front of it on the hill there. And then big block of graybeards in line formation with the BSB next to the copter. In terms of my deployment, again, this is Breakthrough, so I'm just trying to, and I have 7 scoring units, so this is not a scenario that I should lose. So you actually can't even see one of the support units is off on the far right-hand side, like right up against the table edge. And so their job is just going to be to run across the board and get into the deployment zone. So, and Mark was correctly lamenting, even in the deployment phase, like he doesn't have enough units to try to challenge all of my scoring units. I've got another support unit on the far left directly across from his crossbows there. But my thought process is in order to win this game and not just push, I need to take down that Kingsguard block, just like you would need to take down my Imperial Guard to get anything more than, say, a 10 if you're not getting objective. So, yeah, that what I'm going to do, I've got 2 units of flagellants toward the center there. And this is, I had mentioned in the very beginning of the first battle report video, that this is another game where we actually deployed back and forth the entire way because Mark knew right away. I was waiting to see where he was going to put that Kingsguard unit, so I was certainly not going to drop for first. So he was deploying, hoping that he'd be able to counter deploy against my Imperial Guard. But that's not what happened. We went back and forth right up to the wire, and then I was able to drop a unit of flagellants and the Imperial Guard directly across from the King's Guard, because that I'm not trying to get a 10-10 in the final game here. I'm trying to take down that King's Guard. So flagellants in the front, they're going to try to soften them up. I've got a parent unit and a support unit across from the King's Guard, 2 units of Rangers in front there to try to slow down his vanguarded units. Riders and Electro Cav on the left. I've got another unit of Rangers in the woods, another unit of flagellants behind those woods, right next to another parent unit. So both of those guys are going to try to go after those Greybeards. And I'd mentioned on either flank anchored R2 support units, just trying to run up into the deployment zone. So there you go. So he ends up getting first turn, and off we go. So he runs up with the Seekers, did not charge because they vanguarded, and he moves up a little bit with the Kingsguard there. And then his back line, he moves up with the actually moves up with the handguns, and he moves up with the Greybeards and the Copter. So that's where he sits. Magic is a 6-5 phase. He double buffs. I'll tell you, I'm having such a hard time with Dwarf Magic in this event, where everybody seems to be getting off more spells than I can get in the Magic phase as a Dwarf player. He gets off Resilience and Revocation in the correct order against on the Kingsguard. They look like Deep Watch, but they are Kingsguard. And shooting phase, he plinks some wounds off on the flagellants there, and does the same thing to the riders on the left with his crossbows. First cannon misfires, and the second one does another couple of wounds to the flagellants. And this is another picture of the misfire there. And then into my turn 1. So I run up with the support unit on the far right. Flagellants move into the woods. Spears move out of the woods. I'd actually tried to charge with those Rangers. It was a makeable charge, but they rolled double ones, I think. So just kind of lurch out of the woods there. And on the left-hand side, I move to chaff with both the Seekers and the Kingsguard. So both Rangers are in front of those units. And then the wounded riders are kind of trying to hide behind that building as best as they can. And then I run up with the support unit on the left as well. Yeah, that's just showing where they sit. And I think also just showing where they sit. No, maybe magic and shooting. I don't think I did much of anything. I might... Yeah, it looks like either from magic or from shooting I did a wound to those Seekers. So there's something for you. And then I think this is showing his next movement phase, his turn 2 movement phase. So the Copter moves up in such a way that it's essentially chaffing 2 units there. So well done, Mark. And he kind of shuffles up with some stuff on the left as well. He does not charge with the Kingsguard into the chaff, but he does charge with the Seekers on the left there. Oh, I forgot to mention those big circles behind my units are his grudge tokens. He's got 3. So the 2 units of flagellants in the center and my Imperial Guard are all grudged. So hatred against them. 6-4 magic phase to him. He gets off Revocation on the flagellants to try to stop me from getting Stars Align off on him. And then in his shooting phase, the handguns light up the Rangers, but only kill 4 out of the 5. And then over here, I think it was the cannon and the crossbows that did 2 wounds to the Electro Cav. Or no, it was there it is. So the crossbows do 2 wounds, the cannon does 1 more. The Electro Cav hold, and then he kills the Rangers and then congas me like this. It's weird because it's a flank charge for those spears, but I'm gonna have to charge the Electro Cav in too so that they can complete that wheel. So anyway, that's where his unit sits at the end of that combat. We're now into my turn 2. So a bunch of charges in the center there, the Electro Cav and the Spears into his Conga, Flagellants into the other side of his Seekers, because I need to kill that unit in 1 round of combat. And then this support unit moves up to run at the quarrelers, the crossbows there. Riders move around the building. Over here, so on the right, the spears charged into the graybeards, and the flagellants move up behind him. And then I think I don't charge. Yeah, I don't charge the copter. I move out of the way with the rangers so that I can then move up with the flagellants so they're not stuck behind the rangers. And then everything kind of shifts around as you see. And then that support unit way over on the right, they're certainly not going to see combat this game. They're just going to go secure objective. Magic is a 7-5 to me. And I don't think I get anything off, or I get something small off that I didn't even take a picture of, because what you see now is the end of the combat with the Seekers, where everything is kind of turned to face the way you see things. So the one ranger there is still in chaffing position, but it's actually a flank charge for him. And then over here, this combat, yeah, I actually do decent wounds to him, and but he, of course, they're graybeards with great weapons, so they chop me up pretty good. But we hold, and now we're into his turn 3. So he charges in with the Kingsguard. He charges, no, just charges in with the Kingsguard is what I'm showing here. He's chaffing with the copter against the other unit flagellants. So that's going to be a rear charge to that copter for those poor flagellants. Magic is a 7-5 for him, and again another double buff. So he gets up resilience and gleaming. So he's -1 to wound and -1 to hit with that unit. So that's a tough combo. And oh, that's right. This was the round where he got 3 spells off, and the way that happened is he was only up 2 dice, as you can see. 5, yes, 7. So it's actually he's up 1 extra dice, but it's still only 1 spell for a dwarf, right? 8 dice. But he ends up. I rolled 2 4s. He had rolled these 3 spells, and 2 of them I rolled 4s on, which happens. But as a result, he gets 3 spells off. So gleaming twice and resilience once. And then shooting phase, the copter blasts some rangers, and then the handguns shoot a couple more flagellants. And then the cannon does 1 wound to the riders. Actually, no, this is worse. They grape shot at him, because I had forgotten grape shot was even a thing. But you can see if I go way back that the riders have moved up around that building to try to potentially flank charge the handguns. But then he grape shotted me and they ran away. So I rolled, I think, very well, since the unit should have been wiped out, I think, but did not. So anyway, now in terms of combat, I don't have a picture of the spears, but because what we're showing here is the next phase here, because I'm charging into the, yeah. So I'm charging in, I charge flank with the Electro Cav for some reason that I don't remember. Or maybe I don't, maybe it's just very close. Oh no, he charged me? Oh, he overran, of course. Yeah, he killed the ranger and overran into me. That's why I was really confused by this. So yeah, he overran into me. He's charged into the front of the flagellants there. The Electrocav is not engaged because he overran into me. Yeah, this all makes much more sense. So he wins this combat with the spears, but elects not to pursue, and I only run 2 inches. So this is where they sit, because he wants to turn to face the flagellants. He doesn't want me charging him in the flank. And then here we go. So now into my next turn. So I do a bunch of charges, flagellants into the rear of the copter, as advertised. The spears do rally and turn to face kind of like that. And the flagellants charge into the front of the graybeards there. Over here, I charge the kind of the clip the corner there with my halberds, and I had thrown the minimized discipline order there because, again, I can't stop talking about this trick enough that with those small support combat units, you have to kill 16 of them if they're within range of a parent unit, usually, to eliminate steadfast. So you can hold up much larger units with a combat support unit, as long as they're within close support of the parent unit. So that's what I'm doing over there. And then kind of positioning things to hopefully eventually flank charge with one unit and front charge with the other. It's crazy how like disproportionate in terms of maybe not points but units, how much I have to sink into this one unit of Kingsguard in order to hopefully take it down. But I'm not giving up. So 8 to 7 is the magic phase, and I get off Stars Align. And I think this might have not been the one I'm going to tell you the story right now anyway, because it's either this one or it's the next time I get off Stars Align. Of just what a great guy Mark is, and I wanted everybody to know about this. That all throughout this game, consistently, if anything in terms of dice touched a terrain, because we were using the 2D terrain mats, and sometimes with a 3D piece of terrain on top, which is very handy for gaming purposes. But it happens that dice would like roll onto those mats and be semi-cracked, but not cracked enough always that you would need to re-roll. But we had just had a policy that if it was even a little bit cracked, you re-roll the dice, and if you're consistent, there's no issue with it. Um, so it was either this one or the next one where I was bubbling Stars Align. Um, and maybe I am getting ahead of myself because I'm now thinking it was the next time, but it doesn't matter. The story stays the same, which is that I rolled 5 dice and he had 5 dice to try to stop it. And I got a 17 on dice, and he rolled initially to dispel and got a 17, but one of the dice was just a little, like barely touching a terrain mat, barely cracked, to the point where if he didn't re-roll it, I wasn't going to say anything. But we both saw it, and he looked down at it, and he, again, without complaint, picked up the dice, re-rolled it, and it changed his dispel score from a 17 to a 16. And I said something to the effect of like, no good deed, and he laughed it off and said, it's not a big deal, it's why we roll. So just a tremendous guy and great gamer, and that's something that I hope if I'm ever in the same situation, without hesitation, I'll make the same decision. So may we all learn from that example. So I do get off Stars Align there. Over here on the right-hand side, the Flagellants and the Greybeards, you can see really beat the hell out of each other, and that's where things sit. And over here, these Flagellants had eaten the Copter and then pivoted around. And then this is where things sit at the end of that combat. So we're really struggling to do any damage to these Kingsguard because they are -1 to hit and -1 to wound. But we're chipping away like a couple of wounds per phase is kind of what it's mathing out to. Over here, he had charged me, actually. I don't know if I had mentioned that, but they're +1 strength on the charge, so bring it in. And this combat is a push. And then I don't know what I'm showing a picture of here. So that must have been his movement phase. Oh, that's why. So he charges me in the movement phase. He had shot me once before. That's where the wound came from. Yeah, so that's all that's happening here. This is just showing the movement phase. This is his turn into an 8-6 phase. He gets off gleaming again, so -1 to hit, but no -1 to wound. And then the shooting phase, the handguns do some damage to the Flagellants there. I think the cannon shoots there too and does some more wounds. And then we're into his combat phase. So the combat phase, he kills off the remaining Flagellants and then reforms this way. But you can see those Greybeards, there's only a couple models left. So the Spearman, I'm hoping, will be able to, well, maybe not finish the unit off, but we've already devastated him. Let's see what we can do here. And then, yeah, this is where that trick comes into play. So the Flagellants die, and the Halberdiers get taken down to 6 models. But because they're within range of the Imperial Guard there, they are steadfast. So that unit holds on a minimized dis 10 rerollable and holds that unit in place, which is important because now I'm going to be able to flank charge with those Flagellants. So good work, Halberds. Over here, he does 4 wounds to me, and I do 1 to him, but we hold. And now we're into my turn. So I charge flank with the spears, charge flank with the Flagellants. And then the spears that are across from the Greybeards there actually just move up to Chaff because I want him to charge me. So I get an extra pip of AP against him. And, so the story I told you, this is where it happens. Yeah, there it is. So we had a 5-5 phase. So I threw all 5 dice at Stars Align, bubbled it. And then, as I said, Mark made a very noble move of re-rolling the dice, which ended up costing him the spell going off. So again, very grateful for Mark's integrity and character there on that one. But as a result, I bubble Stars Align, so all 3 of those units are now rerolls to hit. Over here, that combat's going to last forever, and they hold there. And this is where things sit at the end of that combat. So spears are engaged in the flank. I win combat. He holds. He's killed all but 2 of the Flagellants, finished off the Halberds, but you can see he's running out of Kingsguard bodies, which is the only way to take that unit down. And now we're into his next turn. He charges the Greybeards into the front of the spears, and he can't reform because he's engaged on 2 fronts there. So he gets off Runic Gleaming onto the Kingsguard, and then moved through the shooting phase. Handguns, I don't think even had viable targets to shoot at. Cannons are plinking wounds here and there if they're firing. Crossbows are engaged. So at the end of that combat, the two flagellants die. He's lost another guy or two, and the spears had reformed as you see them, so they're now deeper. And now it opens up a tasty flank charge for those Imperial Guard. And you can also see, just to tee up the conversation about this, that he had got Rune of Revocation off onto the Imperial Guard, which I'll explain how I try to get around in my next magic phase. He did charge, did some wounds, they run away, and then he turns to face like that. Over here, they're probably still in combat to this day because they're not doing anything. So this is now my turn 5, so I'm running up just in case something terrible happens down at the bottom. I want to have multiple scoring units in the my opponent's deployment zone. So I'm moving the Electro Cav around to then rush in the final turn there. Magic is a 9-6. And yeah, so I had charged the Imperial Guard in. I've got basically nothing else on the board to speak of other than the units that are running into the deployment zone. But what I do is I cast Stars Align onto the Spearman, and the attribute, so that goes off. The attribute triggers Rune of Revocation on the Imperial Guard, so it dispels the attribute, and then it opens up for me to cast Ancestral Aid, which is the spell I'd gotten through the Crown of the Wizard King, onto the Imperial Guard. So both units, through some maneuvering, I was able to get rerolls to hit off onto these Kingsguard. So, and then yeah, this turn of events was certainly in my favor. I wiped out the Kingsguard. I'd made a mistake at first, but again, Mark Ever the Gentleman, I forgot that you can swirling melee around a character. Really, I mean, this is the truth. Like every time I'm successful in a game, it's like more than me being a good gamer. It's usually my opponent being generous and kind. That I thought I had to allocate all of my attacks against the king. I forgot that the unit can swirling melee, the characters cannot when they're being blocked by a character. So initially I'm rolling up all these attacks against his king, and he's like, what are you doing? And I said, oh, I thought I had to attack the king. And he said, no, just attack the unit. So I did, wiped out the unit, and then he breaks and runs, and I run him down, and this is where things sit. So I just killed the Kingsguard. It took almost my entire army to do it, and a bit of luck. We did it. King's gone, Runesmith's gone, Kingsguard are gone, and then both of our armies really is everything you see in this picture other than the support units over on the flanks that are trying to claim objective. And so here we are, his turn 6. He charges flank of those spears with the handguns there. And then he moves up his graybeards. He had reformed them to try to gain like an extra inch, because what he's going to try to do is use Rune of Resolve to push him into the into my deployment zone, which he could just barely do by doing a reform and then again a potentially magic move. Magic is a huge phase. He gets off, it's like a 9-6. But in terms of what he gets off, I don't think it's anything. For the one phase that he got 3 spells off, I don't think he gets anything off that phase. Because I knew, frankly, it didn't matter what else he got off. I knew I needed to stop Resolve. I learned my lesson from game 1, so he's not getting it this turn. Over here, this combat, we again do just like a wound or 2 to each other. Nothing happens. Over here, he wins combat, but I'm steadfast, minimize 10, so they turn to face. And that's it. So that's the end of the game. So that in my last turn, I charged flank with the Imperial Guard. I think we actually shook hands at this point. He said, you can have points for the handguns. I got objective, and then we just counted points. So on points, I got objective. So it was a 13-7 on points, because it ends up being a 16-4 victory to me in the end. So another very enjoyable game. Very, again, grateful to my opponent for all of his patience with me and his helpful advice throughout the game. We actually realized by the end of this game too that it didn't matter what the outcome was, because even if I had 20'd him in this game, I would have been, I think, 2 points behind him on battle points for first place. So anyway, still a strong final result for me in terms of overall tournament performance. It was 18 points for the 4th game, 16 points for the final. I was coming in with 32 points, so that was a 66-point total score for the event for me, which is well beyond what I thought I was going to be getting. Again, I was hoping for 50 points total, 10-point average, so 13.2 or whatever it is excellent. So a lot of luck. The game's 4 and 5. But overall, again, another fantastic event put on by James down in Baltimore. So hopefully we'll see you guys at some of the next ones. And at this point, we're all gearing up for 3.0. This was our kind of last hurrah for the Ninth Age 2.0. So I'll look forward to putting out content for that once the game drops this summer. So hopefully we'll see you around at some future events. And thanks again, as always, for watching. And in the meantime, happy gaming, everybody.